The sun had barely climbed over the Tuscan hills when the iron gates of the Bellestrada villa creaked open, slowly, reluctantly, like the estate itself sensed trouble entering. Leonardo Bellestrada, heir to one of the oldest Italian wine dynasties, strode through the entrance with the frustrated energy of a man who believed the world owed him more than it gave. His shoes crushed gravel with a sharp, irritated rhythm. He hadn't slept. He hardly ever did. And today he chose to return home unannounced. He wanted to catch someone slipping. His father's death the year before had left him an empire, but also a paranoia that gnawed at him like wolves. Every worker, every staff member, every contract felt like a potential betrayal waiting to be unmasked. And so, at 6:12 a.m., without alerting a soul, Leonardo arrived. Inside the villa, the marble floors gleamed with the faintest reflection of the rising light. Silence sat thick in the air, except for one soft, steady sound coming from the grand dining hall. Scrub, rinse, scrub, rinse. A rhythmic cleaning pattern. Slow, careful, methodical. It was the new housekeeper, a black woman named Amara Johnson, an immigrant from the UK who had arrived in Italy only 2 months earlier. She was tall, mid-30s, with deep brown skin that glowed even under the cold lights of early morning, and tightly braided hair wrapped neatly behind her head. She wore the standard uniform of the villa staff, a fitted white blouse, navy skirt, and apron tied with military precision. Her movements were graceful but efficient. Every wipe had meaning. Leonardo's eyes narrowed. He didn't trust new people. He especially didn't trust people he didn't personally choose. But his aging mother, Signora Beatrice Bellestrada, once a formidable figure in Italian society, but now moving slowly with her carved wooden cane, had insisted on hiring Amara herself after firing the previous staff. "She works hard," Beatrice had said. "She reminds me of myself many years ago." Leonardo hated when his mother made unilateral decisions. He hated even more when she defended strangers. And now, as he stood silently in the doorway of the dining hall, watching Amara kneel on the marble floor, he felt something sour rise inside him. Suspicion, anger, and something darker, an old entitlement he didn't acknowledge but obeyed. He watched how Amara worked. She didn't see him yet. She hummed softly under her breath, an old hymn her grandmother used to sing during storms. Her gloved hands, black latex gloves she brought herself because the villa's cleaning supplies irritated her skin, moved with practiced rhythm. She reached for the silver bucket beside her, dipped the rag, wrung it out, then leaned forward to scrub again. Her posture was straight, disciplined, and something about that annoyed him. People weren't supposed to look so dignified while kneeling. Leonardo stepped forward. 1 step, 2. His shadow stretched across the marble like a blade. Amara looked up and froze. Their eyes met. Her expression remained calm, but her heart kicked against her ribs. She recognized him immediately. Everyone in Tuscany recognized him. "Good morning, sir," she said politely, rising to her feet. She spoke with a soft British accent sharpened only slightly by exhaustion. "I didn't expect you back today." "You weren't supposed to," Leonardo replied flatly. Then his gaze drifted around the room. A subtle frown, a long inhale, and then, "What exactly are you doing here at this hour?" he asked. Amara blinked. "My shift begins at 6, sir. I start with the dining hall before the kitchen staff arrives." "Is that so?" he murmured. He stepped closer, close enough that Amara could smell the leather of his jacket and the bitterness of his cologne. Close enough to intimidate. Amara didn't flinch. Leonardo didn't like that either. "Well," he said slowly, "we'll see if you're doing things properly." He walked past her and inspected the polished table, the shining silverware, the spotless floor. Everything was flawless. But Leonardo didn't want flawless. He wanted fault. He wanted control. "You missed a spot," he said sharply. Amara glanced at the floor. It was spotless. "Where, sir?" "Right there," Leonardo snapped, gesturing vaguely to a section of marble that sparkled as brightly as the rest. She looked again. There was nothing there. Then she understood. He wasn't pointing at dirt. He was pointing at her. She swallowed quietly. "I'll clean it again." "You'd better," he muttered. For a moment, the air tightened between them, thick, suffocating, electric. Amara lowered herself back to the floor. Leonardo exhaled through his nose, satisfied. But before he could speak again, a frail voice drifted in from the hallway. "Leonardo, is that you?" Both turned. There stood Beatrice Bellestrada, leaning on her cane, wrapped in a thick robe embroidered with gold thread. Her hair, once jet black, now fell in soft silver curls around her shoulders. Though her body had weakened, her eyes were still sharp, too sharp for Leonardo's liking. "Why are you here so early?" she asked. Leonardo stiffened. "I came to check on the house." His mother's gaze slid past him and softened at the sight of Amara. "Ah, Amara, dear," Beatrice said with a warm smile. "You're working early again. You'll spoil us with such dedication." "Thank you, Signora," Amara replied warmly. Leonardo's jaw tightened. Beatrice noticed. Her expression hardened subtly. "Come speak with me," she told her son. "Now." Leonardo followed her reluctantly toward the hallway. But as he walked away, he threw one last glance over his shoulder at Amara. A dark, unreadable look. And Amara knew. This morning had changed something. Something dangerous had awakened. Something that would pull her into a storm she never saw coming. As soon as they entered the hallway, Signora Beatrice closed the carved wooden door behind them. Her cane tapped sharply against the stone floor. Tap, tap, tap. A rhythm Leonardo had heard since childhood, usually when she was angry. "Why did you speak to her like that?" she asked without turning. Leonardo stiffened. "Like what?" "You know exactly what I mean." Beatrice finally faced him. She had the kind of presence that could silence an entire room even in her frail state. Her auburn-brown eyes, wrinkled with age yet piercing with intelligence, locked onto his. "Amara has worked here for 2 months," she said. "Not once have I received a complaint about her. You, on the other hand, have been home less than 2 minutes and already found fault." Leonardo's lip curled. "Mother, you hired her without consulting me." "You were in Sicily," Beatrice replied calmly. "And I am still alive, not buried. The villa remains in my name." Leonardo clenched his jaw. He hated when she reminded him of that. "She's an outsider," he muttered. "We know nothing about her." Beatrice gave him a cold, pointed look. "And what exactly worries you about her being an outsider?" Leonardo didn't answer. He didn't need to. His mother had lived long enough to recognize ugly thoughts even when they were not spoken aloud. Beatrice stepped closer. "She is a human being," she said quietly. "Not a threat." Leonardo looked away. Silence stretched. Finally, he exhaled sharply. "Why are you protecting her?" "Because she has earned it," Beatrice replied. "And because someone in this house must behave with dignity." Her words hit harder than a slap. Leonardo frowned deeply. "You're saying I don't?" "I'm saying," Beatrice said, adjusting her grip on the cane, "that you are allowing grief to turn you into a man your father would not have recognized." Leonardo flinched. A muscle in his jaw ticked. But before he could reply, another voice interrupted. Sharp, loud, and unmistakably irritated. Signora Beatrice. Finally, someone with sense. Both turned to see him. Carlo D'Amico, a wealthy villa neighbor, known throughout Tuscany for his loud opinions, expensive silk suits, and the kind of arrogance that needed its own room. Today, he wore a gray blazer, shoes polished to military shine, and a gold chain that glittered against his chest. And he was furious. "What is she doing here?" Carlo demanded, pointing toward the dining hall. "Why is that woman cleaning your floors at this hour? And why," he lowered his voice dramatically, "is she still employed here?" Leonardo's eyebrows lifted. His mother's gaze darkened, storm-like. But Carlo continued, oblivious to the danger. "I told you, Beatrice," he huffed. "People like that bring trouble. They don't belong in houses like these. It's an embarrassment to the entire street." Beatrice's cane tapped once, hard. "Carlo," she said coldly, "I do not pay the staff to look like you. I pay them to work. And Amara works harder than anyone I've hired in years." Carlo scoffed. "That's not the point." "That is exactly the point," Beatrice snapped. Carlo blinked. He wasn't used to resistance, especially not from a woman nearly 80 years old. Leonardo watched quietly. This was new. His mother rarely raised her voice. Carlo recovered quickly, adjusting his blazer. "Look, I'm only trying to help your reputation. People talk, Beatrice. They've been talking for weeks." Beatrice's expression became ice. "And what do they say?" "They say you're getting sloppy," Carlo said bluntly. "Hiring just anyone. Letting outsiders into your home. You used to uphold standards. Now look at this place." His eyes drifted toward the dining hall with distaste. Leonardo braced himself. Beatrice lifted her chin. "And I don't recall asking for your opinion." Carlo reddened. "Well, maybe you should." Then he looked at Leonardo seeking backup. But Leonardo didn't speak. He simply watched, absorbing everything, calculating. Carlo, mistaking silence for support, stepped closer to him. "Leonardo, you understand," he said. "Men like us, families like ours, we have expectations to maintain. This arrangement isn't right. You should fire her." The villa's hallways seemed to hush, holding breath. Leonardo didn't answer immediately. He looked toward the dining hall. Through the doorway, he could see Amara kneeling again, scrubbing silently, shoulders straight, back steady, a quiet dignity that made Carlo's words feel even more poisonous. Leonardo's expression flickered, conflicted. Carlo placed a hand on his shoulder. "You're the man of the house now. Do what needs to be done." Beatrice's eyes sharpened. "Leonardo," she warned softly. The pressure curled inside his chest. Carlo on one side, his mother on the other. Amara working innocently in the next room, and the legacy of the Bellestrada name resting on his shoulders. After a long moment, Leonardo removed Carlo's hand from his shoulder. Firmly, slowly. "Carlo," he said quietly, "this is my home, our home." Carlo grinned, thinking he had won. But Leonardo's next words cut like cold steel. "And you do not tell me how to run it." Carlo froze. Beatrice's eyes widened just slightly, surprised but approving. Leonardo stepped back. "If you don't like who works here, do us all a favor and stay away." Carlo's jaw dropped, then reddened. "You'll regret this," he snapped. "Both of you." He spun sharply on his heel and stormed out the front door, slamming it behind him. The hallway fell silent. Beatrice exhaled with relief. Leonardo looked conflicted. Angry at Carlo, annoyed by his mother, and yet, something inside him had shifted. He didn't understand what. Not yet. But the storm Carlo brought into the house wasn't done. It was only beginning. Carlo's departure left a heaviness in the air, like a storm cloud squeezing itself into the villa's hallways. The marble floors reflected the morning light, but the atmosphere felt dimmer, as if the walls themselves were absorbing tension. Beatrice steadied herself against the banister, exhaling slowly. "That man has always been a serpent," she muttered. Leonardo didn't respond. His mind remained fixed on the sight of Carlo pointing at Amara, talking about her as if she were a piece of furniture gone out of fashion. But he wasn't ready to unpack why that bothered him. Not yet. His gaze drifted back toward the dining hall. Through the cracked door, he could see Amara still kneeling, shoulders stiff, jaw tight. She had heard everything. She pretended she didn't. She kept wiping, rinsing, wiping, but her movements had changed. More rigid, more controlled, more guarded. Beatrice noticed the direction of her son's stare. "Go," she said softly. "Say something to her." Leonardo scoffed. "About what? That Carlo is an idiot. That would be a start." He shook his head. "She doesn't need me to comfort her." "No," Beatrice said, leaning heavily on her cane. "But you need to learn to." Leonardo looked away. For all his adult years, he had managed the Bellestrada business with an iron fist. But managing people, real emotions, real wounds was far more delicate. He always chose avoidance, distance, control. He preferred problems he could solve with money, contracts, or silence. Beatrice gently touched his sleeve. "Leonardo, she is alone in a country that is not hers. Show her she is safe here." He opened his mouth to protest, but she had already turned, walking slowly toward the stairs, each step a quiet reminder of her age and the diminishing time he had to learn from her. Leonardo stood still for several seconds. Then, reluctantly, he headed toward the dining hall. Inside the dining hall, Amara was scrubbing the floor with perfect precision. Too perfect. She didn't look up even when he entered. Her braids slid across her shoulder as she leaned forward, the soft hum gone, replaced by tense silence. Leonardo cleared his throat. She still didn't look at him. "You heard him," she said quietly. Not a question, a statement. Leonardo paused. "Carlo says many things, and believes all of them," she added without bitterness, only truth. Leonardo shifted uncomfortably. "You know his type." Amara wrung the rag tightly, droplets hitting the marble. "I know men who think the world belongs to them." "Yes." The room fell into a fragile quiet. Leonardo stepped closer. "He won't bother you again." Amara finally looked at him. Her eyes, deep brown, intelligent, steady, held a mixture of exhaustion and challenge. "With respect, sir," she said gently, "that's not a promise you can keep." He frowned. "Carlo doesn't run this house." "No," she agreed, "but he has influence, a voice, and people listen to voices like his." Leonardo didn't know what to say to that, because she was right. People like Carlo were rotten but powerful in their own way. A few seconds passed. Then Amara looked back down and continued cleaning. "Amara," he said quietly. She paused mid-scrub. Leonardo swallowed, trying to choose words that didn't exist in his usual vocabulary. "My mother hired you because she saw something in you." Amara kept her gaze on the floor. "I know. And He hesitated. "I don't want you to feel unsafe here." She slowly looked up again. This time, there was something unexpected in her eyes. Not fear, not resentment, but surprise. A soft, cautious surprise. "Thank you, sir," she said. He nodded stiffly and stepped back. Conversation over. at least in his mind. Yet just as he turned to leave, her voice floated after him. "Will there be any consequences?" she asked. He stopped. "For you, I mean," she clarified. Carlo seemed offended. Leonardo exhaled through his nose, remembering Carlo's warning. "You'll regret this." His lips curled into a faint, humorless smile. "Let him be offended," he said. "He's always offended by something." Amara's shoulders relaxed, if only a little. Leonardo lingered a moment longer than necessary, something he didn't even realize until he caught himself doing it. Then he left the room, closing the door gently behind him. The moment Leonardo disappeared from sight, Amara's hands began to shake, just slightly, barely noticeable, but to her, they were trembling like leaves caught in the wind. She placed the rag back into the bucket and sat quietly on the floor for a moment. Her throat tightened. Carlo's words echoed inside her skull. "They don't belong in houses like these." She had heard variations of that sentence all her life. In London, in Paris, in Rome. Some delivered softly, some like knives. This one felt like both. Amara blinked, steadying her breath. She refused to cry in the house of strangers. She refused to give racism the satisfaction of staining her dignity. But something stung deeper. The way Leonardo looked at her earlier, suspicion, irritation, something sharper, felt like a judgment she had already been sentenced for. And she didn't know why that bothered her more than Carlo's cruelty. Outside the villa, behind a row of olive trees that bordered the Bellestrada estate, a figure stood hidden. A man, mid-40s, dark hair pulled back, a faded leather jacket, eyes cold and focused. He watched the villa calmly, arms crossed. Then he muttered to himself, "So, the sun has returned." He reached into his pocket, pulled out a cracked phone, and typed a message. "Phase 1 is starting. Stay ready." He slipped the phone away and walked deeper into the trees. Silently, purposefully, as if he already knew this house was about to unravel. 2 hours passed, and the villa slipped into its late morning rhythm. The kitchen staff busied themselves with preparations for lunch, gardeners trimmed hedges outside, and the soft hum of distant conversation echoed through the estate's long hallways. But beneath the usual order, something had shifted. Amara moved from room to room, her steps graceful and efficient, but her thoughts heavy. The encounter with Carlo lingered like a bruise she couldn't rub away. Worse still, Leonardo's reaction. Cold but not cruel, harsh but not heartless, kept replaying in her mind. She didn't understand why she cared what he thought. Maybe because he held her fate in his hands. Maybe because he had shown a flicker, just a flicker of fairness. Maybe because something in his eyes suggested he wasn't the man he pretended to be. She wasn't sure. She didn't want to be sure. The missing object. By noon, Amara entered the villa's private art gallery. A long, elegant room lined with Renaissance paintings, antique sculptures, and inherited treasures preserved behind glass. It was one of her routine cleaning areas, and she approached it with extra care. One mistake, one scratch, and her job would be gone. She dusted the marble pedestals, wiped the frames, and polished the glass cases. Then she froze. One of the cases was empty, a rectangular space, once occupied by an antique ruby brooch, an heirloom worth more than an entire year's salary, was now bare. Amara's breath hitched. No, 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 no. Her pulse raced. She looked around the room, hoping it had been removed by staff for cleaning. But staff didn't handle the heirlooms. Only Beatrice did. Amara checked the floor, the nearby tables, the locked drawers. Nothing. Her chest tightened, fear swelling like rising floodwater. Because she knew exactly how this would look. She was the only staff member scheduled to clean the gallery that morning. She had been alone. And Carlo's voice echoed back at her, dripping venom. People like that bring trouble. She doesn't belong here. Fire her. Amara forced her breathing to steady. There had to be an explanation. There had to be. But she needed to tell someone. Before the wrong person found out first. She hurried toward the hallway. Leonardo hears the news. Leonardo stood in the study room, reviewing documents for the vineyard operations when he heard hurried footsteps. He looked up. Amara stood in the doorway, breath uneven, gloves still on, eyes wide but controlled. "Sir," she said, "I need to speak with you. It's urgent." Leonardo set his papers down slowly. "What happened?" "It's the gallery," she said. "Something is missing." His eyes hardened. "What?" "The ruby brooch." Leonardo straightened immediately. "That brooch belonged to my great-grandmother." "I know," Amara said, voice tight but steady. "I noticed it during my cleaning round. It isn't there anymore." "Are you sure?" he asked. "Yes," she said. "I checked twice. Someone may have taken it." Silence dropped like a stone. Leonardo stepped past her and strode down the corridor toward the gallery. Amara followed close behind, hands clasped nervously. When they reached the room, he inspected the display case. The empty space glared back at him. He turned sharply toward her. "When did you last see it?" "This morning," Amara said. "Right before." But she stopped. Right before Carlo stormed into the villa. Leonardo noticed her hesitation. "Right before what?" Her voice softened. "Right before your neighbor arrived." Leonardo blinked. Carlo again. First insults, now an antique piece missing? It was too close. Too convenient. "Sir," she continued, "I'm not accusing him, but he was the only outsider who came through today. And he was angry." Leonardo inhaled sharply. He couldn't dismiss it. Not after Carlo's threats. He rubbed his temple. "My mother cannot know yet. She'll panic." "What do you want me to do?" Amara asked. He met her eyes. "Help me search the entire villa." Her breath stilled. "You trust me to help you?" she asked quietly. Leonardo hesitated. Not because he didn't trust her, but because he wasn't used to trusting anyone. Finally, he nodded. "Yes." A flicker of relief crossed her face. "I'll do whatever you need," she said. And without another word, they began. Meanwhile, outside the villa, near the olive trees bordering the estate, the man in the leather jacket returned. He watched the villa with the calmness of a hunter observing prey. He pulled out his phone again and received a message. "Is it done?" He replied, "Yes, brooch taken. They'll suspect each other first." Another message popped in. "Good. Be ready for the next step." He smirked and slipped the phone back into his pocket. "Let them tear each other apart," he murmured. Then he walked off. Silent, invisible, untraceable. Back inside, tension rises. For the next hour, Leonardo and Amara searched. The living room, the kitchen, the library, the study, the guest rooms, his mother's suite, every corner of the villa. Nothing, not a trace. Finally, Leonardo sighed heavily. "It's gone." Amara's stomach dropped. He looked at her, expression unreadable. "Did anyone else enter the gallery today?" "No," she said. "Just me." "Then Carlo," he muttered, turning away. And that's when it hit her. Hard. "Sir." "You don't think I—" Leonardo snapped his head toward her. "No," he said immediately, firmly. She blinked, surprised. "You're the only one here who actually works," he said, "and the only one my mother trusts." His voice softened. And for some reason, I do too. Heat rose behind Amara's eyes. Not tears, just the unfamiliar sensation of being defended. But the moment was broken by a sharp voice echoing from down the hall. Leonardo, Amara, come here immediately, Beatrice. They exchanged looks. Something new was happening, something serious, and it was about to change everything.
The dining room fell into a tense, uneasy quiet after Arlo stormed out, the echo of his footsteps fading down the hall like a closing chapter. Kira watched him go, chest tight, the weight of the moment settling on her shoulders like a stone cloak. For the first time in hours, she wasn't thinking about prejudice, fear, or humiliation. She was thinking about survival. Her future, her name, her mother. Mrs. Dawford's fingers tapped rhythmically on the table. A soft, brittle percussion that mirrored her thoughts. "Kira," she said at last, her voice quieter, but still stern. "You need to tell me everything from the very beginning. No interruptions. No sugarcoating." And so Kira did. She recounted the hidden money, the accusations, the night she found the envelope missing, the way Arlo confronted her before she even understood what happened. She told her about the comments, the veiled insults she endured, the way the staff avoided looking at her when rumors swirled. She told her about the confrontation in the kitchen, the moment when Arlo cornered her, shouting that she fit the stereotype. Mrs. Dawford's eyes hardened, wrinkles around them deepening not with anger, but disappointment. Disappointment in her own son. When Kira finished, a silence washed over the room so heavy it made the chandelier crystals tremble faintly in the still air. Mrs. Dawford breathed in slowly. "I trusted Arlo with everything," she said. "But it seems I trusted him with too much." Kira bowed her head. "Ma'am, I never wanted trouble. I just needed the truth to come out." "And it will," Mrs. Dawford replied, rising with surprising strength for a woman of her age. "But truth alone won't fix what he's broken." She turned sharply toward the door. "Kira, come with me." Kira followed. The hallways of the mansion were long, wide, and cold, but none of them felt as cold as the corridor packed with surveillance monitors. Kira had cleaned around this area for months. She had dusted every corner. She had straightened every cord. But she had never been inside. Mrs. Dawford punched in a code with steady hands. The door clicked open. Inside, screens glowed in the dim light, hundreds of angles of the mansion. Hallways, staircases, balconies, the gardens, the private art gallery, and the staff quarters. A sudden jolt hit Kira. If there was ever proof, it was here. Mrs. Dawford stepped forward. "I told Arlo that installing cameras in the staff wing was unnecessary, but he insisted," she said. "At the time, I thought he was being paranoid. Now I realize he was looking for someone to blame before anything even happened." She gestured to a chair. "Sit. We're finding the truth tonight." Kira sat, heart pounding like a trapped bird. Mrs. Dawford navigated through the footage with surprising competence. The confidence of someone who had been running her late husband's empire long before Arlo learned to tie his shoes. Fast-forwarding, rewinding, switching angles. Hours passed. The tension was suffocating. Then, there. Mrs. Dawford froze the screen. Kira's breath caught. On the grainy footage, time-stamped from the night the envelope disappeared, a figure stepped quietly into Mrs. Dawford's private lounge. Not Kira. Not any of the cleaners. It was Arlo. He moved strangely, rushing, nervous, looking over his shoulder twice before entering. He didn't turn the lights on, but he didn't have to. There was enough moonlight reflecting off the polished glass cabinet. Enough to see him pull out the envelope. Enough to watch him slip it into his jacket pocket. Kira covered her mouth, her whole body trembling. She wasn't imagining it. She wasn't wrong. Everything she felt, every injustice, every painful doubt, every moment she questioned her own sanity, it had been real. Mrs. Dawford leaned back in her chair slowly like the weight of the world had just landed in her lap. "My God," she whispered. He set you up." Kira wiped her eyes. "Why?" Mrs. Dawford swallowed hard. Because, she said, he thinks the world owes him more than it's ever given. And when he can't control something, he breaks it. Kira stared at the screen again. The truth was there. Unambiguous. Undeniable. And finally, hers. Mrs. Dawford stood. Kira, gather your things. We're going to settle this tonight. I refuse to let my son destroy another person's life. Especially someone who was helping me live mine with dignity. Kira hesitated. Are you sure? He'll be furious. Mrs. Dawford gave a thin, cold smile. Good. Let him be. I've been silent for too long. She pressed a button, ejecting a small silver USB drive. Tonight, she said, pocketing the evidence. The truth walks with us. But as they stepped into the grand hallway, preparing to confront Arlo, the sound of glass shattering upstairs cracked through the silence. Both women froze. Then, a frantic, guttural shout. A thud. A crash. Mrs. Dawford's expression turned deadly serious. That came from the East guest suite. Kira's heartbeat quickened. She knew who was sleeping in that suite tonight. Mrs. Dawford's elderly friend, the old woman who had arrived earlier that evening. The one who had witnessed Arlo's earlier outburst. Without another word, they hurried toward the stairs. But they had no idea that what waited at the top was about to turn the entire night into something far more dangerous than either of them imagined.
Kira reached the top of the staircase first, heart slamming against her ribs. The hallway was dim, lit only by the soft sconces along the walls. But even in the low light, she saw the glittering shards of glass scattered across the carpet. A broken vase. One that had been sitting on the antique pedestal near the East Suite. Mrs. Dawford clutched the railing as she came up behind her. Stay close, she whispered. They moved forward cautiously. Another thud, followed by a low, strained groan. The door to the suite was half open, swaying slightly as if someone had passed through it in a rush. Kira pushed it fully open. Mrs. Harland? She called softly. No answer. The room looked disheveled. Blankets kicked off the bed, the lamp on its side, a chair overturned. The window curtains fluttered as the night breeze slipped through the fractured pane. On the far wall, the glass was cracked in a spiderweb pattern. Mrs. Dawford stepped in, her breath hitching. Oh, no, no! Kira followed her gaze. The old woman, Mrs. Harland, was slumped near the window, her cane lying beside her. She was conscious, but dizzy and pale. Kira rushed over. Ma'am, are you hurt? Mrs. Harland blinked slowly, raising a shaking hand to Kira's arm. I tried, she whispered. He was shouting, pacing. I told him he needed to calm down. He didn't like that. He? Mrs. Dawford asked sharply. Mrs. Harland nodded. Your son. Kira felt her stomach clench. Mrs. Harland coughed, pointing weakly toward the door. He left, not long before you arrived, but he was furious. And he said, she stopped, taking in a shuddering breath. Mrs. Dawford knelt beside her. What did he say? That he wasn't going down alone. Kira froze. Mrs. Dawford stiffened. What does he mean by that? Mrs. Harland's gaze drifted unfocused to the shattered window. He said he'd already started something he can't undo, and he might as well finish it. Kira felt the air leave her lungs. Mrs. Dawford's hands trembled, the first sign of fear Kira had seen in her since all of this began. Where did he go? She asked. Mrs. Harland swallowed with difficulty. He mentioned the lower garage. Mrs. Dawford's head whipped toward Kira. The lower garage. That's where the estate's safes are stored, and the keys to the service vans. Kira suddenly understood. Arlo wasn't just trying to ruin her life anymore. He was trying to disappear. Or worse, ensure that someone else took the fall with him. Mrs. Dawford's voice sharpened like a blade. We need to get to the garage. Now. But as they turned to leave, Mrs. Harland grabbed Kira's wrist again. There's something else, the old woman whispered, her voice barely audible. He had something with him. A leather case. I saw it when he pushed past me. Mrs. Dawford frowned. A case. Kira's mind raced. What kind? A briefcase. Mrs. Harland shook her head faintly. Longer. Narrow. Like a box. Kira looked at Mrs. Dawford. Mrs. Dawford's face drained of color. That's my late husband's case, she whispered. The one that contains. But her voice cut off abruptly as the lights in the room flickered. Once, twice, then, the entire mansion went dark. A heavy jolt reverberated through the walls as the security system shut down. The humming of the backup generator, normally automatic, did not come on. The silence was sudden, thick, and suffocating. Kira felt her pulse spike. She turned toward the hallway. A low, metallic clang echoed from somewhere deep in the house. Then, a door slamming. Footsteps. Fast, heavy, echoing. Someone was moving with purpose. Mrs. Dawford raised her voice, firm despite the darkness. Kira, get the emergency lights from the hall closet. Now. Kira sprinted. As she reached the hall, a dim strip of battery-powered amber lights flickered on near the floor. The emergency path lighting that activated only during a full system blackout. It wasn't much, but it was enough to see a shadow move at the end of the corridor. Tall, broad-shouldered, pacing toward the stairs. Arlo. And in his right hand, illuminated by the faint amber glow, was the long leather case. Mrs. Dawford's voice echoed from behind Kira. Kira, stay back. But Arlo had already turned his head. He saw Kira, and he stopped walking. His voice floated through the dark corridor. Calm, collected, and deeply unsettling. So, he said softly, I see the two of you found something interesting tonight. Kira stepped back instinctively. Arlo took one slow step forward. Good, he whispered. Let's finish what we started. The hallway felt tighter with every step Arlo took, as if the walls themselves were shrinking away from him. The faint amber lights reflected off the polished floor, casting long, warped shadows that made him look even taller, even more dangerous. Kira held her breath. Mrs. Dawford stepped forward from behind her, planting herself between Kira and her son. Her voice was steady, but beneath it lived a tremor of something too complex to name. Heartbreak, fury, and a mother's last effort to salvage what she could. Arlo, she said, whatever you're planning ends now. Arlo laughed. Quietly, bubbling up like a crack in glass before it shatters. Mother, you're finally awake. He tapped the leather case against his leg. But it's too late for lessons. Mrs. Dawford's voice sharpened. You stole money from me, and you framed an innocent woman. Arlo's jaw tightened. Don't pretend this is about money. It is, she snapped. Then softer. And everything else you've broken. Arlo's eyes flicked toward Kira and lingered. A slow smirk crawled across his face. Ah, he murmured. So that's what this is really about. The maid and the queen teaming up in the dark. Kira felt her skin crawl. She clenched her fists but stayed silent. Her instincts told her that any wrong move might push him over the edge. That case, Mrs. Dawford said, pointing at the leather box he held. Put it down. Arlo raised it slightly. Why? You afraid of what's inside? Don't be ridiculous, Mrs. Dawford snapped. Your father's old surveying equipment isn't a weapon. Kira blinked. Equipment? Arlo chuckled darkly. That's what you thought was in here? He slowly slid the metal latches open. Click, click. He lifted the lid, but only an inch. Mrs. Dawford gasped. Kira saw her eyes widen, but from her angle she still couldn't see the contents. "What is that?" Kira whispered. Arlo pushed the lid open the rest of the way. Inside was not a tool, not papers, not surveying gear, but a sleek, antique pistol, polished, engraved, and preserved in velvet. The family heirloom, a relic, a weapon. Kira's throat went dry. Mrs. Dawford stumbled back a step. "You took that from your father's safe?" Arlo closed the case again, this time gently. "He left it to me. You weren't supposed to touch it," she hissed. "It was locked away for a reason." Arlo tilted his head. "Well, Mother, tonight is full of firsts." He took another step forward. Mrs. Dawford raised her hand defensively. "Arlo, listen to me." "No," he cut in, his voice dropping to a cold, controlled whisper. "You're going to listen to me for once." Kira scanned the hallway, searching for anything she could use to intervene. But the darkness swallowed detail, and the emergency lights were too dim to reveal much. Arlo continued. "I didn't steal from you. I borrowed money to cover something important." Mrs. Dawford's tone cracked. "Important? Like ruining an innocent woman's life? She wasn't supposed to be here," he shouted suddenly, sending the lights flickering again. "She wasn't supposed to see anything." Kira flinched. Mrs. Dawford steadied herself. "You planted the envelope on her." Arlo didn't deny it. Instead, he smiled, a slow, terrifying smile. "It was perfect," he said, "until she started digging, until you started believing her." Kira stepped forward before she could stop herself. "Why me?" she asked, voice trembling but steady. "Why did you choose me?" Arlo turned his head toward her. Even in the faint glow, she saw something shift in his eyes. Not hatred, but resentment. Deep, twisting resentment. "Because you were easy," he said. "Invisible. The kind of person no one would question." Kira's stomach dropped. He kept going, voice quietly venomous. "You walked around this house like a ghost. Cleaning, sweeping, smiling. People like you don't fight back." "Well," she said softly, meeting his gaze, "you misjudged me." Arlo's expression twitched, just slightly, as if her calm unsettled him. Mrs. Dawford seized the moment. "Arlo, give me the case." He clutched it closer to his chest. "No, Arlo, no!" His shout ricocheted through the hallway, and then he ran, down the corridor, toward the back staircase, toward the lower garage. Mrs. Dawford gasped. "He's going for the vans." The realization hit Kira like a blow. If he escaped tonight, if he fled the estate with a weapon, stolen money, and a story already twisted in his favor, she would be destroyed. Mrs. Dawford would be humiliated, and anyone who dared speak the truth would be crushed under his lies. Kira didn't think. She just moved. "Come on!" she shouted, sprinting after him. Mrs. Dawford limped behind her, calling out, "Kira, wait!" But Kira wasn't slowing down. Not tonight. Not after everything. The stairs spiraled downward, lit only by dim strips of amber. Arlo's footsteps slammed against the steps below. Frantic, unhinged, uneven. And then, a bang. Metal hitting metal. A door. The garage door. Kira raced toward it. As she reached the bottom step, she pushed through the swinging metal door and skidded to a halt. The lower garage was huge, echoing, dark, filled with rows of service vans, storage lockers, and emergency generators humming faintly in the shadows. Arlo stood near one of the vans, the engine key dangling from his fingers. His expression was different now, colder, resolved. Kira, he said softly. You should have stayed upstairs. She took a slow step forward. You don't want to do this. He opened the leather case. The pistol gleamed. Kira's blood iced. Arlo lifted his gaze. And for a moment, she saw not rage, but something more dangerous. Conviction. This, he whispered, is my way out. No, Kira said, shaking her head. It's your way down. Arlo cocked the weapon. Kira, he said quietly, move. She didn't. She stood her ground. Even when he raised the pistol toward her. Even when his finger settled on the trigger. Even when Mrs. Dawford's horrified scream echoed down the stairwell behind her. Kira! The moment froze in time. Arlo exhaled. And then, his finger tightened. The trigger shifted. The gun fired. The echo of the gunshot ricocheted across the lower garage, bouncing off the concrete walls, the metal vans, the storage lockers. Kira felt her ears ring. Dust from the ceiling vents rained down in thin motes of light. But when the smoke cleared, a heartbeat later, nothing hit her. She stared at Arlo. His arm had jerked mid-shot, and the pistol had ricocheted harmlessly off the edge of a metal toolbox, clattering to the floor. Kira's chest heaved. You missed, she whispered, disbelief threading every word. Arlo froze, the mask of confidence slipping just a fraction. I didn't expect you to move like that. His hand trembled slightly as he bent to retrieve the gun. Behind her, Mrs. Dawford panted heavily, gripping the rail of the stairwell. Kira, be careful, she warned, voice sharp. He's dangerous. But Kira had already taken a step closer to him, every nerve on fire. Arlo, this ends tonight, she said, voice steady. Put the gun down. Put the case down. You're not going anywhere. Arlo's eyes darted to the vans, then to the rows of storage lockers, then back at her. He swallowed hard. You don't understand. They'll never forgive me if I fail. Who? Kira pressed. Who are you talking about? Arlo's face twisted in frustration. Everyone. The people I've promised. The money. The reputation. If I don't take control, I'm nothing. They'll destroy me. Kira's mind raced. She realized then that Arlo had been playing a much bigger game all along. And tonight, the stakes weren't just about money or inheritance. His pride, his ego, his entire sense of identity was bound up in this. And that made him unpredictable. Mrs. Dawford stepped forward, her voice calm but sharp. Arlo, listen to me. You've already lost. But if you put that gun down, there might still be a way to fix some of this. Run, and you'll ruin everything. For everyone, including yourself. Arlo's breathing quickened. His eyes darted from Mrs. Dawford to Kira, then to the emergency exit at the far end of the garage. He calculated silently, and then, without warning, he bolted toward the vans, pistol still in hand. Kira lunged. The two collided mid-hallway, the leather case dropping and sliding across the concrete floor. The gun skidded as well, coming to rest inches from Mrs. Dawford's foot. They struggled, each trying to gain control. The weight of Arlo's fury pressed against Kira's chest. She felt her strength waver, but years of cleaning, of lifting, of bending and reaching, gave her an unexpected leverage. With a final, desperate twist, she forced Arlo backward, straight into one of the van doors. Metal groaned. Arlo stumbled, and the pistol slipped entirely from his grip. Mrs. Dawford swooped in, grabbing the weapon and tossing it into a secure locker. Enough! She yelled, voice echoing like a hammer. Arlo sank to the floor, chest heaving, eyes wild, realizing for the first time that he had lost control. Kira crouched a few feet away, breathing hard. It's over, Arlo. she said. It's done. But Arlo's lips curled into a bitter, twisted smile. You think this ends with a scuffle in the garage? He whispered. You think anyone will believe you? Anyone will believe me? Mrs. Dawford's gaze sharpened. I'll make them believe, she said simply. She moved forward and pressed a button on her phone. Immediately, red lights blinked along the walls. Emergency security alerts, sent directly to the local authorities. Cameras all over the estate activated, capturing every angle of the struggle. Kira felt a surge of relief. Finally, justice would not just be her word against Arlo's. The garage doors began to open automatically, letting in the first rays of the early morning sun. Kira realized then they had survived the night. They had survived Arlo. But the consequences of his choices, the lies, the manipulations, the lives he had tried to ruin, were just beginning to unfold. Arlo slumped back against the van, defeated but not entirely broken. You don't understand, he muttered almost to himself. Mrs. Dawford's voice was ice. I understand perfectly. You underestimated us. You underestimated her. And that mistake will follow you for the rest of your life. Kira stepped forward, calm now, her eyes steady. And don't think for a second I'm letting you control anyone ever again. Outside, the sound of sirens approached, echoing across the driveway. Red and blue lights splashed across the garage walls. Arlo's jaw tightened. He had lost the battle. But the war, the legal consequences, the exposure, the humiliation was just beginning. Kira stood tall. She had survived the night. She had survived him. And she knew, without a doubt, that tonight marked the beginning of her victory. Mrs. Dawford placed a steady hand on her shoulder. You did well, Kira. More than well. You survived a storm, both literal and metaphorical. Kira allowed herself a small smile. We survived it together, ma'am. As the authorities stormed the garage, securing Arlo and his stolen items, Kira felt a sense of calm wash over her. For the first time in months, the weight of fear and suspicion lifted from her shoulders. But even as Arlo was led away in handcuffs, she knew this wasn't the end. It was a beginning of truth, justice, and rebuilding. And somewhere deep inside, she knew one thing for certain. She would never, ever be underestimated again.